Welcome to another episode of The Riffle, a podcast series brought to you by 10 Leaves.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, so imagine you're a broker at like a top-tier financial firm. You're sitting at your desk and you know that in exactly 10 seconds your institutional client is going to execute this massive buy order.
Oh, right.
An order so huge, it's going to instantly drive up the price of a specific equity. And, well, you happen to have your personal brokerage app open on your phone right then.
Naturally.
Right. You could easily just buy a few thousand shares for yourself right now, wait those 10 seconds for the client's order to hit, and instantly pocket a totally risk-free profit. Do you make the trade?
I mean, that specific scenario, that's exactly the nightmare that keeps regulators awake at night.
Yeah, I did.
It's basically the entire reason we are opening up this report today. It's from June 2026 from the Dubai Financial Services Authority, or the DFSA.
Right, the DFSA.
Yeah, and the report is titled, Conduct Supervisory Pulse Oversight of the Trading Environment, Personal Account Dealing.
Exactly. So today, we're doing a deep dive into personal account dealing, which is usually just called PA.
Yes, PA.
Our mission today is to give you an insider's look into how regulators actually, keep the financial markets fair. We're going to unpack the mechanics of PA and why that temptation to misuse confidential information is just so immense.
It really is. And we'll look at the highly technical and sometimes, honestly, pretty invasive ways that brokerage firms are attempting to police their own ranks.
Invasive is a good word for it. But before we get into the rules, we kind of have to understand the environment that even made this report necessary in the first place.
Right. The context is everything here. You have to look at the Dubai International Financial Center, the DIFC. It's experienced this period of just explosive, unprecedented growth.
Like, truly explosive.
Yeah. Between 2022 and March of 2026, the number of authorized brokerage firms operating there jumped 68%.
Wow.
They grew from 49 to 72 firms in just that short window.
And the headcount across those firms, it basically doubled. But, the metric that really highlights the scale of this boom is the revenue.
Oh, absolutely. The profit margins are wild.
Right. The net profit for these firms went from $80 million in 2023 to $301 million in 2025.
That is just...
It's a 276% increase in a 2-year window.
Which is staggering. And when an industry scales that aggressively, the physical infrastructure of a firm like the trading desks, the sales teams, the client onboarding, that all expands rapidly to capture the incoming capital.
Right. You build out the money-making side first.
Exactly. But the compliance and risk management frameworks, they rarely scale at that same velocity. So the revenue engines are running at maximum capacity, but the internal oversight mechanisms are just left operating on these outdated systems.
Systems designed for a firm half the size. It's like trying to build a rocket ship while it's already mid-flight.
That's a great way to put it.
The sales and trading engines are firing on all cylinders with that huge profit jump, but the compliance and HR seatbelts are just struggling to keep up with the G-force.
Yeah, and that structural lag, it creates a massive vulnerability, specifically when it comes to personal account dealing.
Because when we talk about PAD, we aren't just talking about, a finance professional managing their 401k or their standard retirement portfolio.
No, not at all. We are talking about employees who sit right at the nexus of global information flow.
Right.
They have access to unexecuted client orders. They see confidential research before it hits the wire. They possess highly sensitive market data.
And the risk there is front-running, right, which is exactly that scenario we described at the start.
Exactly. Front-running.
Yeah.
If an employee uses their privileged access to buy or sell an asset before a major client order moves the market, they are mathematically guaranteeing themselves a profit.
At the direct expense of market integrity.
Exactly. Without rigorous, technologically advanced controls, PAD invites severe conflicts of interest or just outright market abuse.
So because of this massive influx of capital and personnel into the DIFC, the DFSA obviously saw this vulnerability, and they decided to run a baseline industry-wide survey.
Right. They wanted a reality check, just to see how well these rapidly expanding firms were actually guarding against those insider risks.
And the results were honestly pretty shocking.
They really were. The regulator found this huge divergence in how firms manage this risk. The data reveals a heavy reliance on informal systems that simply do not work at scale.
Okay, let's get into the numbers because they're wild.
Sure. So the survey found that 18% of the firms had absolutely no documented PAD policies in place.
None.
Wait, zero policy.
Zero. And get this, only 59% required any kind of prior approval or notification before an employee executed a personal trade. That's almost half the industry just doing whatever they want. But okay, the finding that really requires some unpacking for me is this: 32% of these firms did not maintain a PAD register.
Yeah, no manual or electronic log at all.
I just want to look at the daily logistics of that for a second. We are talking about highly regulated financial institutions. They're handling hundreds of millions of dollars. How does a brokerage firm physically operate without a centralized spreadsheet tracking what their own employees are trading?
Honestly, in practice, operating without a register means the compliance function is entirely decentralized and, frankly, chaotic.
Like, are firm leaders just willfully turning a blind eye to keep their star traders happy? Or is it administrative incompetence?
It's often a mix of both, but practically it usually means trade approvals are buried in these fragmented email threads, or they're scattered across individual managers' inboxes.
Oh, man.
Or even worse, it's just granted via verbal heads-ups in the hallway, like, hey, I'm going to buy this stock. Sure, go ahead.
Wow.
When a firm has, say, 15 employees, a founder might rely on that informal interpersonal trust. But when that same firm doubles its headcount and triples its trading volume,
It breaks down.
completely breaks down. Attempting to audit those fragmented emails becomes functionally impossible. There's no central database to cross-reference against market events.
So if the DFSA comes in and asks to see the trading history of a specific desk for the last quarter, the firm literally cannot produce a coherent document.
They can't. And the DFSA, they didn't just ask for the internal registers and leave it at that. They conducted independent regulatory inquiries.
Right, they went to the source.
Exactly. They pulled the actual trading data from exchanges and clearinghouses, and they compared it to the blank or fragmented records these firms had.
And I'm guessing they didn't match up.
The discrepancy was glaring. The independent data proved that employees were actively trading in the market, while the firm's internal systems showed absolutely zero visibility into those activities.
That is wild. So, okay, if a third of the industry lacks the basic infrastructure to even log a trade, what did the DFSA find when they looked at the firms that did have policies on paper?
Well, having a rule book doesn't necessarily mean the rules make sense for the environment. The report heavily criticized the use of what they called one-size-fits-all policies.
Because a receptionist shouldn't have the same trading rules as a lead broker.
Right, exactly. A robust governance structure recognizes that risk is entirely dependent on an employee's access to information.
Right.
A lead research analyst drafting a report on the energy sector has a completely different risk profile than, say, an IT support technician.
So what do the good firms do?
The most sophisticated firms establish tailored, peered policies. They enforce strict blackout periods for sensitive roles, like completely banning personal trading around earnings seasons or major client transactions.
Makes sense.
And they extend those restrictions to digital assets, too, and even to the trading accounts of connected persons, like spouses.
But the DFSA also highlighted this glaring loophole in the bad practices column: the use of retrospective approval.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
This concept of trading first and then asking the compliance department for permission later.
It defeats the whole purpose.
Right. To me, retrospective approval is like, well, it's basically asking for forgiveness instead of permission.
Yeah.
Which, that might be a fine strategy for eating the last donut in the break room, but it definitely shouldn't fly for trading digital assets when you have insider knowledge of a client's moves.
No, definitely not, because the entire purpose of compliance in this context is preventative. The regulator stance is that a trade must be cleared against the firm's restricted lists or watch lists before it hits the open market.
Right, before the damage is done.
Exactly. If an employee executes a trade based on insider knowledge, the market has already been altered. The client has already been disadvantaged.
It's too late.
Allowing a compliance officer to sign off on that trade after the fact, that is an oversight. It's simply rubber stamping market abuse and creating a false paper trail of compliance.
So, if the policies are supposed to prevent the trade, how is the leadership of the firm ensuring those policies are actually working? Like, how does a board of directors oversee the daily trading habits of hundreds of employees without just drowning in the minutia of every single stock purchase?
That really comes down to the quality of management information, or MI. In the weaker firms, the board simply receives like an annual memo stating that all employees have signed the code of conduct.
Which means nothing.
It's administrative noise. It provides zero insight into actual behavioral risk. Strong governance relies on data-rich MI dashboards.
So they want real metrics.
Yes, a competent board demands to see the volume of trade requests, the frequency of watch list hits, the specific number of policy breaches, and they want a heat map showing the risk ratings of those breaches, segmented by department.
Well, that's smart. That level of data would let the board spot a localized culture issue on like one specific trading desk before it metastasizes into a firm-wide regulatory failure.
Exactly. You spot the smoke before the fire starts.
But, a beautifully designed MI dashboard is completely useless if the data feeding into it is just based on the honor system.
Very true.
A policy that bans retrospective approval only works if the firm actually knows a trade took place. So how are these firms detecting unauthorized trades in real time?
Well, the DFSA report exposes a pretty stark divide in surveillance capabilities here. The primary failure identified across the sector is this over-reliance on what they call employee attestations.
Which is just a fancy way of saying the honor system, right?
Pretty much. It's a system where the firm simply asks employees to declare their private trades on a form, and they just take their word for it.
Without checking.
Right. They don't require any independent hard evidence, no direct broker statements, no electronic trade confirmations to verify what the employee is claiming.
That's crazy. You're relying entirely on the goodwill of individuals who are heavily, heavily financially incentivized to bend the rules.
Exactly.
So what is the technological alternative to just asking nicely?
The alternative is automated, hard surveillance. The really sophisticated firms utilize direct API integrations.
Okay, how does that work?
They require employees to hold their personal brokerage accounts with specific approved platforms. And those platforms feed the employees' trading data directly into the firm's central compliance software in real time.
Wow, okay. So it's instantly tracked.
Yes. When an employee attempts to execute a trade on their personal app, the software instantly cross-references that ticker symbol against the firm's internal watch list and client order flows.
And if there's a match?
If there's a conflict, the API automatically blocks the execution of the trade before it ever reaches the exchange.
See, that is robust. But the report also detailed some highly advanced post-trade surveillance, right? Specifically, the use of group monitoring with a specific lexicon.
Yes, the lexicon surveillance.
We are talking about algorithmic keyword tracking applied to employee communications. How does that actually look in practice?
So it goes far beyond simply flagging the word buy or sell. The compliance algorithms actually ingest audio from recorded phone lines and text from electronic communications, and they search for complex contextual patterns.
Like what kind of patterns?
They're looking for combinations of urgency, specific asset tickers, and phrases that are clearly designed to evade detection.
Oh, like, let's take this offline.
Exactly. Phrases like, take this off the main channel, or let's move to a different device.
Yeah.
The system flags those behavioral anomalies and then alerts a human compliance officer to step in and review that specific interaction.
Okay, I want to look at this from the perspective of the employee for a second.
Sure.
Because if a firm requires a direct data feed into my personal investment account and actively cross-checks every private financial decision I make against global market movements,
Right.
and on top of that, they deploy natural language processing algorithms to analyze the subtext of my phone calls, where is the line between standard financial compliance and just a deeply invasive Big Brother environment?
It's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
I mean, how do you even sell that to your staff? How do you recruit top talent when that is the working environment?
Look, the tension between individual privacy and market security is a constant debate in high finance. It always will be. However, the regulatory framework leaves absolutely no room for ambiguity here.
The regulators don't care about the awkwardness of it.
Not at all. The DFSA enforces strict suspicious transaction and order report obligations. It's known as STORR.
Store, okay.
Under STORR compliance, if a firm's infrastructure is used to facilitate market abuse, even inadvertently, through an employee's personal account, the firm itself carries the liability.
So it's not a choice for the firms.
Exactly. Proactive, aggressive surveillance isn't corporate overreach. It is a hard regulatory mandate. It's required to protect the broader financial ecosystem. When a professional accepts a role, granting them access to market-moving data, surrendering a degree of personal financial privacy is simply the non-negotiable price of admission.
That makes sense. You cannot demand the leverage and access of a major institution without accepting the microscope that comes with it.
Well said.
But, even with API feeds intercepting trades and algorithms parsing audio logs, Human beings are still the ones reviewing the alerts and making the final adjudications.
That's the human element.
Right, which brings the DFSA report to the foundational element of any financial institution. Its corporate culture, and specifically the integrity of its record keeping.
Right, because culture dictates what actually happens when the algorithmic alert goes off. Do you ignore it or do you act on it?
Exactly.
The DFSA examined how firms build that culture through training, and they found that weaker firms provided almost no formal interactive training. They simply handed new hires a static compliance manual and asked for a signature.
Just checking a box?
Yeah. But the highly compliant firms deploy tailored induction programs. They require annual refresher courses. They meticulously track completion rates.
And they test them, right?
Yes. Crucially, they test their employees with complex scenario-based questions to ensure they actually understand the nuances of market conduct risks, rather than just memorizing a list of internal procedures.
Because culture is what your employees do when no one is looking, but accurate record keeping is how you prove your culture when the regulator finally comes knocking.
That's exactly it.
Yep.
And the true stress test of that culture is what the firm does with the data it collects. The DFSA requires all records of personal account dealing to be retained for a minimum of 6 years.
6 years is a long time to keep things organized.
It is. And during their review, the regulator highlighted a specific scenario that perfectly illustrates the danger of prioritizing optics over transparency.
Oh, the falsification example?
Yes. They found a firm whose internal registers showed a mathematically perfect record, 0 breaches of its PAT policy over an extended period.
Which sounds great, right? 0 breaches.
To a layman, maybe.
Yeah.
But to a regulator, a perfectly clean sheet in a massive, high-volume brokerage firm is the ultimate red flag.
Because it's literally impossible.
Exactly. In any organization with hundreds of employees executing thousands of complex, high-speed transactions, human error is just inevitable. Someone will misread a restricted list or misinterpret a blackout window.
Mistakes happen.
So a register showing 0 breaches does not indicate flawless compliance. It strongly indicates that the internal surveillance systems are totally broken, or worse, that management is actively suppressing the data.
And the DFSA knew, based on their independent tracking of the exchange data, that the 0 breach record was entirely falsified.
They had the receipts.
Right. And there's a massive philosophical difference between a compliance failure and a cover-up. If your systems catch a rogue trade, well, you have a compliance issue that needs fixing. But if you falsify the records to hide the trade, you have no culture of integrity at all.
The DFSA's message here is very pragmatic. They actively encourage firms to self-report breaches.
Really? They want you to tell on yourself.
Absolutely, because self-reporting proves to the regulator that the firm's internal alarm systems are actually functioning, and that management is willing to act on those alerts.
So hiding it makes it so much worse.
Oh, exponentially worse. Deliberately hiding the truth, like presenting a falsified paper trail to the regulator that transforms a procedural failure into a deliberate deception. And that is the fastest route to severe financial penalties and even the revocation of operating licenses.
All right, let's distill what we've unpacked today. We started with the sheer velocity of the DIFC's financial boom, right? Where brokerage profits surged 276%, creating this environment where revenue generation vastly outpaced the compliance infrastructure.
Right, the rocket ship mid-flight.
Exactly. Then we looked at the reality check of the DFSA survey. It revealed a staggering number of firms operating without basic policies or the logistical ability to even log their own employees' trades.
And we examined the stark operational divide in the industry between the firms relying on verbal attestations and retrospective approvals versus those sophisticated institutions deploying API integrations and lexicon surveillance to physically block unauthorized trades from hitting the market.
And finally, we saw how the compulsion to present a perfect, falsified record is really the ultimate signal of weak governance.
A huge red flag.
So bringing this back to you, the listener, if you aren't working on a trading floor in Dubai, why does the mechanics of personal account dealing even matter to you?
It's a great question.
It matters because the global financial system is interconnected. Whether you're a retail investor managing a modest portfolio or a participant in a massive institutional pension fund, you are relying entirely on the mathematical integrity of the market.
Absolutely.
When you execute a trade, you are trusting that the price of the asset reflects genuine supply and demand, not a price artificially inflated by insiders who leveraged confidential data to step in front of the line. The surveillance feeds, the algorithms, the 6-year record retention mandates, These are the invisible shields preventing the market from operating like a rigged game against the public.
And that invisible architecture is currently undergoing a massive stress test. The publication of this PAD report is really only phase one of the DFSA's thematic review.
Right, they have more coming.
They've explicitly announced that their upcoming deep dives will target two highly complex areas. The first is best execution practices, and the second is the oversight of communication channels and record keeping.
And that second area is going to be a monumental battleground. I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as we wrap up today.
It's a big one.
We just saw how much difficulty these firms are having tracking the relatively straightforward mechanics of personal stock trades within their own internal systems, right? What hidden landmines are regulators going to uncover when they shift their focus to the encrypted, ephemeral messaging apps like WhatsApp or Signal that brokers and traders use to communicate with clients and each other every single day?
Oh, it's going to be wild. Extracting structured compliance data from decentralized encrypted networks is a technological and legal labyrinth.
I mean, if the compliance frameworks are already buckling under the weight of monitoring traditional emails and official trade logs, what happens when the regulator demands full visibility into the pilot's private, encrypted group chats? It's going to force a complete reevaluation of how business is conducted.
It's going to be a fascinating collision between privacy tech and regulatory mandates, that's for sure. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.